My name is Diva. I took a work break on quarantine measures. I have two incredibly supportive and hardworking parents and 5 brothers and sisters. 3 of them are OFWs like me. Ours is a middle-class family. I used to play average my entire life, blending in the crowd. And yet, this made me feel so out of place. There's a peculiar type of loneliness that blooms when one is distant from everyone else. It's not periodic, not the kind that creeps up when I'm traveling without friends and I suddenly miss them. Not the type that comes on cold nights spent alone and a spouse is abroad on a 2-year contract. It's not even the loneliness that manifests when a loved one dies and I'm left without their presence physically. It's not the loneliness that moves the soul when I make myself vulnerable, taking courage and exposing my fears, hopes, and dreams in the same spectrum. It's the type of loneliness felt whenever I say yes when I should have said no. Or when I gave away pieces of myself in silent exchange for acceptance. Until one day, I realize I've given away so much that I'm left with just a small piece of the person I once was. And then I'm lonely for myself, wanting the old me back, my very essence upon birth, when I knew I am enough.
Wow! So that was a short excerpt from How to Do Lonely. Let's raise our teacups, mugs, whatever you have there with you, and celebrate the opening of our launch party for How to Do Lonely.
Hurrah! Here's to a joyful launch
Yay!
for a book that's actually called Lonely.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm Terry. I'm currently in Seoul, South Korea. Kuya Rabay, you are in?
I'm in Hong Kong.
And Lauren?
I'm in Singapore.
And Ate Diva, the book author.
I'm in Tuguegarao, Cagayan, in the
Okay,
Philippines.
so those are our current locations. Welcome and thank you for joining us today in this launch. Okay, so the first question before we proceed with, Ate Diva's introduction to the book and her stories and everything, I wanted to ask Kuya Rabay a question. Kuya, what do you think, can you tell us about the foreword that you wrote for How to Do Lonely? And what do you think might be the connection between the current pandemic and the writing of this book?
Wow, so that's a lot of things in one question actually.
Exactly.
Let's break it down bit by bit, okay? So in order to write a foreword, the goal has to be clear. Yeah, you're introducing the author as well as introducing the book, both of which were very daunting tasks for me because both topics are highly complicated, highly complex. It's very difficult to write about something that you have personal involvement in. And when you read the book, and I'm sure when you read the book, you love it because it tugs at the heartstrings. There's an entire chapter dedicated to how the author, my sister, has dealt with my own struggles with drug addiction. And so how do I, as a person, remove myself from that experience and write objectively about that? And then the second part of it is, how do I make sure that in the writing of this forward, I do as much justice to the book as I think it deserves? I don't want to let my little sister down. I'm the firstborn of the family, and I'm also the first one to venture out of Tuguegarao. When I went to Manila for university, I was 16. It kind of felt like living already in a sense, yeah, leaving home for abroad. Flying away from what I thought to be my identity and learning to spread my own wings and establish my own self.
Exactly.
Of course, in 2005, I got the opportunity to leave the country for real and go to Hong Kong, where I am now, and be part of the opening cast of Hong Kong Disneyland. And I tend to think that because I was able to take that step, it opened the doors for the rest of my siblings to see the possibility that it's a viable future also for each of you. Yeah. And I'm glad that somehow each of us, regardless of what has happened between the time that we left home and now, where we look, relatively happy, we've gone through hardships along the way, and this is what this book is all about. And we are in one such challenging time once again, this time of quarantine, this time of COVID, where we're apart, we're trying to stay connected, and while the world is at standstill, we're trying to make sense of it and create something that's meaningful, so that when we come out the other side, we're able to look back and say, that's what I did during the pandemic. That was the product. That was the product of my pain. That was a product of the darkness. And so when I was actually going through the book, it was tough. It was a tough read. It was a tough read. We always want to feel like we're doing a good job of being a family member.
Yeah.
We're doing a good job of being an OFW, bagong bayani. Yeah, the martyr that sends money back home and supports our family in more ways than one. You know, Filipino families are very supportive of each other, and there's a culture of giving back to the family system that supported you as you were growing up. It's never just about, okay, now you're leaving the country and you're free to make a future for yourself. No, there is a part of you that has to be self-sufficient, and there's a part of you that has to give back to the system that brought you to where you are now. So it's very Asian in a way, and I believe that this is uniform across Asian cultures. We never want to think about the hard times. And when people ask you, how are you doing? Yeah, it's a loaded question. Because although we want to say in a very flippant moment, yeah, everything is okay, how about you? Diba? It's always like that. It's such a hard question to answer, because how honest can you be in that moment when someone asks you, how are you doing? The truth is there's many layers of reality in that question. And when you say, how are you doing? In essence, that is what my sister has answered in the book. How are you doing? And the answer is, there are moments when she is lonely, and there are moments when she has struggled. And I resonated so much of that loneliness has resonated with me. Why? Because when I first came to Hong Kong, not only was I in a hurry to establish myself here and make my mark here in the community, in society, and have myself be accepted as a contributing member of society here, but I also wanted to project an image of myself as successful back home. Because when Filipinos back home look at OFWs, there's this term called may narating. Yeah, you've got to somewhere in your life, not just physically, because you've got to somewhere, maybe, in Hong Kong or the Middle East or the US. Of course, you've got to somewhere physically, but in terms of achievement, going abroad to forge a life for yourself is already seen as an achievement. And so I tended to not share any of the emotional struggles myself. And there was a lot. On the one hand, I did not want to share, the struggles that I had with my family, because I did not want any of you to feel bad about the support that I was extending to you while you were still in university. And yet it came at a cost to my own, financial well-being and mental well-being and emotional well-being. And I did not have a healthy way of managing my complicated feelings or, the complex relationships and the things that were going on in my head. Since as the firstborn, I did not have anyone to look up to help me sort out what was happening. And so unfortunately, what had happened is I fell into drug addiction. I fell into alcoholism until such time that I went into an overdose, which is then discussed in the book. I went into an overdose. And for a while, Diva really had to take reins over the family and kind of guide not only myself and my treatment in rehab, but also hold our parents' hands emotionally and financially through this very difficult time. She was the point of contact for the lawyer who was making sure that I would not, be thrown in jail for being in possession of. And also Diva was a main contact person for my therapist in communicating what the issues are and how our family is to proceed with family therapy, because drug addiction is seen not just as an individual experience, but actually the product of family issues since childhood. And so a lot of these things are tackled in the book factually as well as I poetically, I would like to say, because my sister has found a way with the cadence of her language that is so beautiful to read. It's like it's very poetic and it's her own way of communicating. Such that as I was reading through it, I was like, wow, it's impressive. Of course, all the pain came rushing back, but I also had to admire the craft and the artistry that went into it. It's not just, a journal. It is art. And so with that in mind, I had to write, I had to write a foreword, um, making sure that it was about her, but also putting it in context and also making sure as well as I could that I do justice to what the readers are about to encounter in the book. So that was my mission in writing the foreword.
Kuya, that was a really meaningful forward, and thank you so much for setting the context, even for us today, for the book launch itself. Because I think that it really forms a huge part of our story, of Ate Diva's story on how to do lonely. And also, thank you so much for being honest about your experiences while reading the book. It really does make you remember the bittersweet memories and I guess all those emotions are part of the experience of reading this book. Yeah.
Yeah, it's easier to share about the joys and triumphs, of course, because this is the image we would like to project
Yeah.
to others. But also, this is a story that we like to repeat to ourselves, that we're doing well. But actually, it's the ones where we struggle. It's the ones where we have a hard time that teaches us lessons, that teaches us to be stronger, and that teaches us to accept ourselves unconditionally, warts and all, and that teaches us to look inside for the answers. So I was really in admiration that someone chose to write a book like this. When we talk about the Filipino OFW experience, it's just all about, the heroism and the contribution to the economy. These are the topics that are always covered when we talk about OFWs. But what about the pain? What about the loneliness? What about the sense of isolation? What about, the senseless remittances, the senseless money that you send home just to prove that you're connected or that you are present,
Yeah.
and just to make something okay. And those things are compounded as well because something that you do, which you repeat, then becomes a habit. And so there is a lot about the Filipino OFW experience, which also leads to our financial ruin, I have to say. So the goal of being an OFW in the first place is financial independence. Yeah, this is why we go abroad so that we can earn in a currency that has more meaning than pesos. Yeah, just to put it out there. But when we are here and we send money back home for every single thing that we think would make up for our absence for being home, then we lose sight of what's really important. We lose sight of the time of making good use of the time that we are here in order to build a strong foundation for our return.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Kuya Rabay. I think that summarizes many parts or many chapters in the book. And also, I wanted to ask Lauren. Lauren, what does the title of the book sound like to you? I'm sure you haven't read most of the chapters yet, but I wanted to ask you how to do lonely. What do you think of this title? Do you think that there's a connection between the title of the book itself and Ate Diva being right in our ancestral home in Tugigaraw in San Gabriel in the time
Mhm.
of writing?
Mhm. Well, to be honest, when I first read the title of the book, I got worried because of her current situation, thinking about her current
Yeah,
situation
yeah,
and everything that's been happening at home
yeah.
at the moment.
Mm.
I thought that she was going through, um, some emotional roller coaster at home. And I've always been I've always felt like the little sister of like the baby sister of Ate Diva. From the moment I was born, she was the only one left at home with me, while everyone else was going about their businesses, going to playtime activities and stuff. Ate Diva felt like she had this big responsibility to take care of me. So
Yeah.
when I read the book and she told us that it was a memoir, I got worried. Like, But in fact, this is a reflection of her whole life. Like, what didn't kill her made her stronger. I understood her loneliness all throughout those years of being in the ship. Whenever I asked her how she was doing, she would always say, "I'm busy. I'm receiving all these praises from my seniors," and she would tell us, she would tell us good news, but we would rarely hear about her her moments of vulnerability or her moments of pain, even though we've tried to ask her time and time again how she's really doing. So it's a great reflection of her journey, um, being in the ship and all, and yeah.
What about you, Lors, personally? Have you ever felt any loneliness as an OFW in Singapore?
Well, to be honest, Ate Diva was here with me during my first week and during the first week that I moved to Singapore, and it was such a big help because I was just adjusting, and I haven't really found my place yet, but while she was here, we were able to go around. She was right with me when I first when I first took a bus to go somewhere in Singapore.
Wow!
So
Talaga?
yeah, so it was really nice having her around on the first week. But yeah, I did have my shares of loneliness. There was a point in my entire stay in Singapore where I wanted to move to the US, and that's the point where I also met my current partner, and uh, as a result, I stayed in Singapore. But yeah, well, yes, I've had my moments of loneliness.
Uh-huh.
I've had moments where I asked myself, why am I doing this? And up to this day, and yeah, but Atadiva and the rest of you are such great examples, and it's it just keeps me going.
Mhm. So in a sense,
You
what
guys
you've
keep me
just
going.
what you've just
I'm not
described,
as
Lors,
I'm
has.
sorry, I'm not as elaborate. My answers aren't as elaborate as yours, Kuya.
It shows all our different personalities, and I really
Mhm.
appreciate the way you answered this question, Lors. And I
Mhm.
really think that it makes the title of the book itself and the content, of course, more relatable because we've all been there. Lonely is a day-to-day word in our lives as
Mhm.
OFWs. Like as Kuya Rabi mentioned earlier, we think that siguro may narating or we are successful and happy, but actually there are huge chunks of our time that are spent on feelings of loneliness or um, other kinds of emptiness and longing. Yung mga ganun, those synonyms, right? And I think that also feelings of not belonging, like wanting to relocate. Should I go to the US instead? Should I go back home? How to do lonely, or is it really a how-to book? The divs, did you
It's
mamaya na?
more of, actually, Kuya Rabbi would always tell me, sis, show, don't tell. All right. So he wanted me to veer away from being too preachy.
Mm.
And how to do lonely is the exact opposite of being preachy, because it's me showing how to do it, but not necessarily telling you how it's done. You get what I
Gra-
mean? It's that
I know.
particular moment when you are.
I know exactly what you mean kasi I was actually crying in tears. Yung background music ko pa tanging yaman. while
And you
reading the first
recorded
few
yourself
chapters.
while you're reading the book.
I recorded myself reading the book
Yes.
and crying and the dibs. Grabe tong
Hi,
book
baby.
mo and everything. You want to say hi to everyone?
Hi, baby.
Hi,
He's the
hi.
Hi,
baby. He's calling
Robin.
us baby. Thank you so much. So that's it. That's your experience of loneliness for now, Lors. And maybe hopefully the readers will also experience the same kind of um, walking at the Diva, the author walking us through the book, not really preaching how to do lonely. And I think this is how we were brought up by our parents as well, not in a preachy way, but it's in a show don't tell kind of way. Yeah. All right. So anyway, finally it's time to hear from the author herself, Ate Diva, Diva Gannaban, How to Do Lonely. And you know what? Since the very beginning, I think you've always been a writer. Yes. And you were born to be one. You even took up English literature as your bachelor's, your major in Ateneo de Manila University. Your work has been published in the Young Blood section of Inquirer, and also you've contributed to the Cosmopolitan magazine. And just recently, contributor na siya sa coffee table book of the Ateneo de Manila University Library, Rizal Library, alongside other Palanca award-winning authors. So I think that we can call you the writer in the family. Thank you so much for coming up with this book. Can you tell us a little bit more about the writing itself and other things you want to share with us?
Thank you, sis. First of all, I want to say thank you to Kuya Rabay, Lauren, for sharing those stories. Uh, Actually, they were memories that I thought that I forgot already. And when you started telling them, suddenly all the feelings start coming back. I became emotional. And that's the power of storytelling.
Mhm.
I've always been fascinated with storytelling. Gulliver's Travels, Nancy Drew series, The Hardy Boys, Archie Comics, Sweet Valley High, Jessica Zafra's cassette tapes.
Yes.
Whether my medium is written work, public speaking, or photography, I've always wanted to tell stories like the people that I admire. And I also wanted to be the person that I admired the most. So my journey towards writing started when I was very young, probably at 6 years old. I have loads of library cards filled from my school. My dad used to buy loads of encyclopedias, even my mom. They would load our room. If you remember, our room, we had a library section. We had one shelf upstairs and another shelf downstairs and another shelf in the dining room. And it all these written works, all these stories, all these travels to museums and all these arts, literature, all of this really created an impact on me as a creative person. So I took up literature in English to study literary criticism. And my thesis, which I aced, by the way, was about postmodernism. And it was about that era. It was a book on bibliolepsy, a book that was telling a story on martial law. So I was writing all throughout college. From elementary until college, I was part of our school paper. But then my writing stopped as soon as I worked on cruise ships. As soon as I started traveling for work, which is kind of
It's been 13 years.
ironic. Yes, it's been 13 years that my writing has stopped. And then this pandemic hit.
Yes. And you find
Everything
yourself
for me.
there. Yeah.
Yes, and I find myself stuck at home. And it's been like this for the past 6 months. So everything permutated for me as soon as the pandemic hit. Suddenly, I've never just seen myself as a seafarer because I had no ship to go to. I've never seen myself as just now a financial advisor or a life coach. And that's part of my story. Obviously, we're living in this very big narrative, meta narrative. We're going through this pandemic, experiencing something in common. And for me, there's no other story. There's no other story than this pandemic and how we got here. So I started looking back on my experience, and I said my journey is definitely not over.
Yeah. Loneliness definitely comes in different shapes, the divs, and I think you've made it clear in your introduction and in the book na talagang we experience it in so many different forms. And I think that this book is not only the product of your love for writing, but also one that represents your passion to be one with the OFWs in the most or in this loneliest time in our lives.
Definitely, sis, we have organizations and priorities to keep in mind, even while we are experiencing this particular period in history.
Mm-hmm.
I enrolled in this personal mastery course, and with it, I started listing down my priorities in life. And I became so obsessed to adding value to the world that I said I needed to share my story. Not need to, but I wanted to share my story and let that genius out. So some little observations. I became much more accessible than I used to be.
For
As
sure.
Lauren said,
Yeah, yeah.
before I used to just share everything about my awards, every good news, every bit of good news. But then there were times when I would go dark, when I wouldn't even be part of our Viber group conversations. And so were you guys. I mean, I believe that it's not just me that is experiencing this kind of OFW phenomenon where I'm just gonna tell my family the good things, but I'm not gonna tell the bad things.
Grabe
And
yan,
that's
no?
how, yeah, that's how I started saying, you know what, it's time for me to write a memoir of that particular time in 2014, in that particular time in the history of our family, when everything went dark, when we thought that all was good, and then this day came. It was supposed to be a good time in our lives where we were celebrating dad's birthday. They went on a cruise with me, and then everything went dark. So we're all better for it. I thought to myself, why wait for more heroes? I just started showing up during this pandemic, and I got, as I've said, I got so obsessed with putting value into the world that I co-created a community called Kabayan Money Goals. I started pouring out my stories to OFWs and started sharing their stories as well. Because eventually, you know what, heroes show up during dark times. This loneliness is a word that we just put so many attachments and so much weight to as OFWs. But we don't really need to have a title to have an inspirational force in our lives today to create a masterpiece on a lockdown. To, for example, rise at 5 o'clock in the morning and do yoga at 6 o'clock in the morning. To learn how to meditate. To stay focused. And Kuya Rabay would also, I remember his stories and his articles about not taking too much polluted space on social media. So I started also being mindful about my posts. I didn't take up space when I didn't need to, but I took up space when I wanted to share something with conviction. And I really wanted to be that kind of master at what I do. A time to do nothing, it's also a great time. For me, this new book is very personal, and I'm glad that I'm sharing the launch with the four of you because it's a chapter in our lives as a family. When I say I'm proud of how my parents raised us, and I'm proud of the stories and the history of this particular period of our lives, I am proud of how we emerged in that lockdown event.
Yes, I guess you can say that we have completely emerged from this lockdown, embracing the new normal, but also embracing loneliness as part of our story. Yes, but
Yes.
we are not only OFWs, the four of us, but we also share one important similarity, which is that our stories are intertwined and we share the same birth parents, mom and dad. So, is there anything that you would like to tell mommy and daddy during this launch?
Mommy and daddy, it's harder to be reflected when I'm not at home. That's what I can say. When I was in beautiful places, traveling and seeing all this culture and arts and seeing new things, it was harder for me to reflect on the beauty that is already there. And I've taken you both for granted for such a long time. This book, this book is a messy book, very, very messy. It came at a period when everything for me was uncertain. Even my job as a seafarer, 6 months of not being on board. And I want to be honest with both of you. My book is how I'm going to be of service to you as your daughter. That's pure honesty because I wrote it with so much love and I dedicate it to both of you. And there are chapters over there that might be very difficult to read. It's this extraordinary feeling of heaviness when everything comes back, when there's blame, anger, guilt, and shame involved. And for me, that's how I wanted to release everything. It's time to simplify. And for me, simplifying means releasing to my parents, the people that I know have always been there, that have always supported me, never questioned me why I took that course in college. When then I started to do photography, they never questioned any of my career choices, any of my course choices, any of my relationship choices. Understand, mom and dad, that this book is my way of navigating, my way of depleting, my way of to, my way of becoming of service to you and to my fellow OFWs, to my siblings, to my family. So why did I put myself through all of this? As I've said, I became dedicated and so obsessed, so calibrated in creating something provocative during the lockdown series, during my times of loneliness, that I started shattering that idea of loneliness, which I'm sure my parents have also been experiencing now that all their kids are away, except for Vincent. They've become empty nesters as soon as we all became adults. And this is very, very personal to me. Mom and dad, I am apologetically owning my heroism, although the world would hate me, although a lot of people would raise their eyebrows when reading this book. This is really where I draw my energy from both of you and from both of your stories. For me, this book is about enforced quietude. It's about my mission and my crusade. It's about piloting something, owning my bigness and owning the fact that I am your daughter.
Grabe. Tedious. Parang ang bibigat nung paghinga ko, pero lahat, everything you said was from the heart, truly from the heart. And I think that it's really time to tell your version of the family's story, our not only bright times, but also dark times, and also being the true introvert that you are, you know, hindi ka magbibitaw ng salita ng basta-basta lang. Everything is so deliberate. And here we now see the writer in you totally emerging and letting go of all those bags, blame, anger, guilt, and shame that you talk about. And so thank you so much for being so honest. Thank you so much for telling these stories. Before we close the launch, actually, I wanted to ask you what other steps or what can we expect from you in the near future? Any more projects? Any more books, revelations, or whatever?
Yes, as I've previously said, I co-founded this community called Kabayan Money Goals. It's we formed a team of life and wealth coaches to help us through these times, and not just through these times, throughout our lifetime. And over there, we invite a lot of OFWs, global Filipino professionals like the four of us
Yeah.
to share their stories of heroism. So I'm going to be launching a news magazine that also shows heroism, heroic stories. And whenever we look at COVID-19 sis, we're looking at the master narrative. So there's no other way for me to go but to create. When you ask me what are you up to, I'm always creating. There's no other story for me except being driven by this narrative of what the pandemic has done, changing the world of digital disruption, doing a book launch over the internet. There's no other disruption. We now have moved into, as I've said, a world of seamlessness. We must communicate, deal with each other in a seamless ways that fits into each other's lives. And we're not going to be able to communicate with each other, grab each other for a moment. Let me get Nikki for a moment from South Korea, or let me
Please.
have Kuya for a moment here with me. Let me have Lauren here with me for a moment. We cannot do that physically right now. There is a sort of distancing involved. And my projects actually revolve around this seamlessness now. We're doing FB Live, we're doing digital ebooks, we're publishing news magazines. It's a servant marketer model that I've created. Aside from Kabayan Money Goals, I also have Voyage to Wealth, my page, my Facebook community that teaches people how to create wealth, to grow wealth, and to have a life of abundance. Because for me, that's a greater opportunity now. It's a greater accountability to the world. And I don't want to be tone deaf. I don't want to be called out. But at the same time, I'm not afraid. You can do whatever you want to make out of the book, out of the community we're building. But for me, there's never been a politer world than where we are now. We are going through a very interesting phase where people now have substance. People have now started becoming more quiet, more reflective, and everything, as I've said, is exacerbated by the pandemic. We are now striving for universal truths. My projects are centered around it, and I have very, very good team of supportive people that are helping me with this mission.
Amazing. Okay, so I think this mini launch party is about to come to an end, but this is truly your debut as an OFW, as a writer. And I think that based on everything that we've talked about today, the loneliest moments are indeed the happiest moments too. Yeah? Isn't that?
Yes, that's definitely about the loneliness. And I'm a great believer in the world of bundling. You bundle loneliness with happiness. You bundle loneliness with, yes, with excitement in a bundling of ideas
I
and not
love
just having one
it.
idea that is so transformative and disruptive. It's like you, Nikki. I'm a bundle of a person who is a mom, who is also a teacher, who is a wife. So it's a series of good ideas all put together, creating something that's great.
Bundling. Okay.
Yes, I
Wow.
think that's the approach.
I love it. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, one big congratulations one more time. A round of applause. Thank you so much, the Dibs. Kuya Rabay. Yes, we raise our glasses again.
Cheers!
Cheers,
Cheers.
Lauren, the Dibs. Thank you so much. And of course, all of us, mommy,
Love you
daddy,
all.
yes, Kuya
Love you
Rabay,
all.
Damien, all of us in the family, Lauren, Toma, Emma, and the little one that's to come, Iggy Boy, Ise, and Raquel and Isabella,
Isabella.
of course, and me right here in Korea with Robin, Ronnie, and my Harmony and Haraboji, of course. We would like to congratulate you and thank you. for being so brave and being honest during this difficult time. Tedibs, congrats. We love
Thank
you.
you.
Yes.
Thank you. It's a lot easier now to reach to everyone. People are so much nicer. Thank you, everybody. Read my
Bye.
book. We will post the link here, okay, where you can download it free for a limited time. I'm gonna make it free for the whole month because it's my birth month as well. It's my birth week.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy
Happy
birthday.
birthday!
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye. Bye.
everyone.
Bye. Kisses.
Wait!
Wait, somebody wants to say goodbye too.
Bye,
Okay,
Bye!
Robin.
congrats,
Bye.
tita.
Congrats, Diva ka naman!
I am just a stone on the road. I am just a shadow of your hope. All I see are my imperfections, but still you always find the good in me. You're the color of my days and my nights. Through the darkness, Lord, you are my light. And in the storm, your love kept me alive. Never knew heaven was by your side.
I am but a servant of your word. Where you go, I will follow. You gave peace to my restless soul, and then my heart that was hollow.
You're the color of my days and my nights. Through the darkness, Lord, you are my light. And in the storm, your love kept me alive. Never knew heaven was by your side. Lord, here I am until the end. I surrender myself to you. Lord, here I stand, flawed as I am. I have my faith, keep my prayers beside. To you I confide, my Jesus, my King. Through the darkest of nights, your grace is all I find. My Jesus, that I see it. I know you're a star. Where you go, I follow, no matter how far. If life is a movie, oh, you're the best part. Oh, you're the best part. It's those sunrise and those brown eyes. You're the one that I desire. When we make love, and we make love, it makes me feel so nice. You're my water and I'm stuck in a desert. You're the Italian that I take when my head hurts. You're the sunshine of my life. I just want to see how beautiful you are. You know that I see it. I know you're a star. Where you go, I follow, no matter how far. If life is a movie, oh, you're the best part. Oh, you're the best part. If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Won't you? If you love me, won't you say something? If you love me, won't you? Love me, won't you?